Hello students, I am Dr. Vijay Bhandari. So I am going to teach you installation of Linux. So firstly, I will tell you about the Linux, like Linux introduction, and then I will explain you how to install the Linux operating systems. So now Linux is community of open source Unix-like operating systems that is based on the Linux kernel. It initially released by Linus Torvalds on September 1991. Initially, Linux is created for personal computers. Gradually, it is used in other machines like servers, mainframes, computers, supercomputers, right? So, it is a free and open source operating systems, and source code can be modified and distributed to anyone commercially or non-commercially under the GNU General Public License. The biggest success of the Linux is Android operating systems. It is based on the Linux kernel that is running on smartphones and tablets. Due to Android, Linux has the largest installed base of all general purpose operating systems. Linux is generally packaged in Linux distributions. Now I will tell you about the Linux distribution. Linux distribution is an operating system that is made up of a collection of software based on Linux kernel, or we can say distribution contains the Linux kernel and supporting libraries and software. And we can get Linux based operating systems by downloading one of the Linux distributions, and these distributions are available for different types of devices like embedded devices, personal computers. Around 600 plus Linux distributions are available, and some of the popular Linux distributions are shown in this slide. So this is the experiment number 1. There will be a Linux installation. So before the Linux installations, I am giving you details of some Linux distributions versions. So firstly, I will tell you about the Arch Linux. Okay, so Arch Linux is this is the Linux distro is popular among developers. And why it is popular? So it is a independently developed systems, and it is designed for users who go for a do it yourself. So that's why it is very popular and among developers, right? So there is also one of the most used Linux distributions for the enterprise and web servers. This is the CentOS. So CentOS is a free enterprise class operating systems and is based heavily on Red Hat Enterprise distro. Another is Debian. So Debian is also a stable and popular non-commercial Linux distribution, right? So it is widely used as a desktop Linux distro and is user oriented. It strictly acts within the Linux protocols. Okay, and if we talk about the Fedora, so Fedora is a Linux kernel based distro, and Fedora is supported by the Fedora project and interware by Red Hat. It is a popular among desktop users, and its versions are known for their short life. So we will talk about the Gentoo. It is a source-based distribution, which means that you need to configure the code on your system before we can install it. And it is not for the Linux beginners, but it is sure for fun for experienced users. So if you are an experienced user, so you can run on your system, and it is a very popular amongst the users, right? So another is Linux Mint, and it is the one of the most popular desktop distributions available out there. It launched in 2006 year and is now considered to be the 4th most used operating systems in the computing world. Next is OpenSUSE, and it is an easy to use and a good alternative to MS Windows, and it can be easily set up and can also run on small computers with obsolete configurations. Now next is Red Hat Enterprise. Another popular enterprise based Linux distribution is Red Hat Enterprise, and it has evolved from Red Hat Linux, which was discontinued in year of 2004, right? It is a commercial distro and very popular among its clientele, right? So next is Slackware, and Slackware is one of the most important and oldest Linux kernel based operating system. So one idioms is always said old is gold. So this is the gold for the users, and it is another easy desktop distribution. It aims at being a Unix like operating systems, right? So Slackware is one of the most and oldest Linux kernel based operating system. Now next is Ubuntu. So this is the third most popular desktop operating system after Microsoft Windows and Apple Mac operating system. It is based on Debian Linux distribution, and it is known as its desktop environment, right? So I have told you about the Linux versions, and in fact we can say many versions are more, like MX Linux, Manjaro, Linux Mint, Elementary, Ubuntu, Debian, Solus, Fedora, OpenSUSE, and Debian. Okay, so now in next slide, I will tell you about the installing Linux using USB stick. So firstly, I will tell you about the ISO file. So firstly, we will download the .iso or operating system files on our computer from this below link, right? So download the .iso or the OS file on your computer system from this link, and Ubuntu 16.4.3 LTS, which you can download and run it. So download free software like Universal USB installer to make a bootable USB stick. After that, we will moving in on step 2, download free software like Universal USB installer to make a bootable USB. So download UI and basic requirements like given in this slide, and select an Ubuntu distributions form, the drop down to put on your USB, and select your Ubuntu ISO file download in step 1 as we see in previous slide, and select the drive letter of USB to install Ubuntu and press create button. So you can see here the press and create the button, and you will find out these files. Now in next slide, click yes to install Ubuntu and USB. Definitely if you click the yes to, so it will be installed, and after that everything has been installed and configured, and it will give you a message, congratulations. So now you have Ubuntu on USB stick and bootable and ready to go, right? So download and install VirtualBox, and download the VirtualBox, select your directory to install VirtualBox and click on next. You will find the VirtualBox and you can easily run it on your operating systems. Now an operating system based on the Linux kernel is called a distribution, that is called in short form distro, and there is 100 of distributions available, some of which is designed to accomplish a purpose like running servers, act as a network switches. Naming the best Linux distribution is difficult as they are made for the different, and Linux can be installed on your systems through the below mentioned methods like USB sticks, live CD, and virtual installations. So there is also important facts, the kernel. So kernel is the core of the Linux based operating systems, and it virtualizes the common hardware resources of the computer to provide each process with its virtual resources, right? And this makes the process seems as if it is the sole process running on the machine. The kernel is also responsible for the preventing and mitigating conflicts between the different processes, different types of the kernels like monolithic kernel, hybrid kernels, exokernels, microkernels. Okay, and there we will also talk about the system library. So it is a special type of functions that is used to implement the functionality of the operating systems, right? You top. So thank you so much.